The Chicago business scene is as diverse as the city itself, but we don't always hear from the entrepreneurs who keep the Chicago economy colorful. That's where I come in. I'm Micaela Brown, and this is the Minority Report. Curtis Tarver is a successful attorney who runs his own law firm and worked for the Richard M. Daley administration. So, what's the obvious next step for this entrepreneur? Opening a brewery, of course. I met with him at Vice District Brewing tap room, still under construction at the time, and talked with him about how brewing and law mix, being the first minority-owned brewery, and his most humiliating beer experience. Is it Chicago South Loop's first micro brewery that's owned by a minority?
Well, I think there are only 2, maybe 3 breweries in the nation that are owned by minorities.
Really?
So it would definitely be the first one in Chicago, in the South Loop.
Right.
Yeah, probably Illinois, if I'm not mistaken.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
How does that make you feel?
I mean, it makes me feel great, but I think, here's the thing about beer. People typically like it or they don't. They don't really go back and start peeling back layers and say who made it. If they like the beer, they like the beer. If they don't like the beer, they don't like the beer. So it's been totally fine. I mean, it's not surprising when we walk into a room that we kind of stand out a little bit because there are no other minority-owned breweries in Illinois. But we've not had any issues with anyone. To this point, I don't anticipate any issues, going forward.
Out of all the beverages, vodka, tequila, gin, wine, why beer?
Because I already made it. I wasn't at home making wine or vodka or gin and things like that. I mean, I was a home brewer, as was my business partner. So beer just kind of made sense. I mean, we started off, quite frankly, because we wanted to save money on beer. And then we looked up
Really?
and spent, yeah. So that's why we initially started. And then it just became, went from a hobby to a passion to an addiction.
Tell me a little bit about the law that you practice, owning your own law firm. What made you decide to go in business for yourself first in law?
I knew when I was in law school that I wanted to own a firm because the numbers just didn't really work otherwise. My practice is all focused on small to mid-sized businesses. So my largest client is probably about 150 million in revenue. My smallest client is probably somebody who's going to start up tomorrow. But how it relates to the brewery is, it was a lot easier to structure the deal. We took on investors. It was a lot easier to structure the deal because that's what I do on a daily basis. That's where I think between structuring deals, which allows me to be creative, and putting together a beer recipe, which allows me to be creative, the two just kind of match. They both make sense to me.
Being an attorney and owning a brewery are 2 different ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Has that hindered or influenced your creative ability to do this microbrewery?
That's a good question. So it hasn't hindered it, that's for sure. My law partner is actually an investor in the brewery, so I kind of have a pass to get this thing up and running. But I co-own my law firm, so I've always had kind of an entrepreneurial side.
What advice do you have for other aspiring entrepreneurs that have a 9-to-5 that would like to come up with a concept like this? What advice would you give them to start it out in the right way?
I think the most important thing is to have a very, very specific business plan. Understand your demographics. So before we undertook any of this, we can tell you how many people bought an iPod in the South Loop in the last 5 years, right? We did an extensive amount of research. And that's incredibly important because for a space like this, people have to feel comfortable paying $5 or $6 for a single beer. Even up the street where most kids are from Robert Morris or Roosevelt or Columbia, where they're college students, right? You want to be a little farther down the street. So I would think the most important thing is to put together a very solid business plan, have someone help you with it, rip it apart, don't just show it to your friends and family. Get some very, very critical feedback about it because if you're going to take somebody's money, they're going to want a portion of your business. They're going to have very detailed questions for you. And, just to say, I have a good idea, it's a strong hunch, I know it'll work, you're not going to get money from a bank or from an individual investor like that.
Tell me about your most humiliating beer experience.
That's easy. The first beer event that we poured at was in Lincolnshire. It was an event to raise money for persons with disabilities. I got there early, and for some reason, while we had everything prepared, we did not put washers on the back of, it's called a jockey box. It's pretty much a cooler that has coils in it so you can run beer through it. You dump a bunch of ice in there so the beer comes out cold. And so you need washers on the back so that the beer doesn't actually squirt out. And I conveniently forgot to put those on there. But what I did not forget was to hook up the CO2, which pushes beer, dumped all the ice in there, and I ended up walking away for a couple of seconds to talk to somebody. And this guy walks up, he's like, dude, is that your beer spilling all over the place? So, yeah, that was...
Was it a beer explosion?
Oh,
or was it a beer trickle?
No, it was an explosion. Like, it was full-fledged, like, grab towels, get everything that you can. You're like trying to hug the box. Like, it was really, really bad.
So do you keep those washers in your pocket now, considering they're only 35 cents?
So I actually have a checklist now before I go to any event. And on that list, 2 things I never forget. 1 is beer, because you have to have the beer to pour it, and 2 will be washers.